Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast is brought to you by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. They have over 66 years of experience, and Compassion does it right, finding that the most effective way to care for children in need is through the local church. They partner with more than 7,000 local churches in 25 countries to bring God's love and care to children in need, one child at a time. And today, more than 2 million children are breaking the cycle of poverty for good through Compassion International. Here's a way how you can make that difference. Go to compassion.com/sports spectrum. Compassion.com/sports spectrum. You'll see a list of children there. $38 a month, tax deductible. Pray about it. Certainly pray about it. And then consider it. Consider sponsoring a child and being able to release them from poverty. Safe water, education, medical care, safe housing. That's where this $38 goes every single month to a child in need. Go to compassion.com/sports spectrum and pray about releasing a child from poverty today. Today on the podcast, one of my favorite interviews that we've done in a while, and this is with Mike DeVito. Mike is a former NFL defensive lineman, played 9 seasons in the NFL with the New York Jets and the Kansas City Chiefs. He was with the Jets from 2007 to 2012, played with Brett Favre in that 2008 season with the Jets, and then led by Rex Ryan and Mark Sanchez, played in 2 AFC Championship games in 2009 and 2010 with the Jets. Moved over to the Chiefs and played in the playoffs there as well. Had some tough games in Kansas City and played with Chiefs Kingdom from 2013 to 2015, retiring in April of 2016. In college, Mike played at the University of Maine and went undrafted in 2007 and, made the team. And I always tell people, when you're an undrafted player and you come through the system of being undrafted, you have the deck stacked against you. You are one that can tell a story of working hard and persevering if you make it in the NFL for even just more than 1 season. And Mike did it for 9 seasons in the NFL. He retired April 11th, 2016, and is now post-NFL career as a college student. And that's where we start off the podcast. And Mike has some great stories about coming to faith in college, what it's like to play through pain in the NFL. I don't think a lot of fans understand the pain that these players have and deal with every single day. And the transition, what it was like to transition out of the NFL. It was not an easy one for Mike. And he talks about that very candidly here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Take a listen to Mike DeVito, former NFL lineman, here on Sports Spectrum. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Jason, thank you so much for having me on, man. It's awesome to be here. I love the work and the ministry that you're doing, so it really is an honor to be here today.
I appreciate that very much, Mike, and it's been fun to follow along on social media, kind of go back and forth with you a little bit, and I know that you're hosting a podcast now, 3 Point Stance Podcast, but you're also, now that you've been retired for a few years, you think, okay, what's he doing now? Going into, a job force? No, you're actually going back to school. So you get out of school, you go play in the NFL, and now you're back. So explain exactly this world that you are now living as a student again.
Yeah, so a meathead who's been slamming his head against metal for the past 2 decades, and now all of a sudden I want to be an intellectual, right, an academic. So it can only be the power of God that that would allow something like that to happen. But no, yeah, I've always had a passion for theology and philosophy and kind of thinking through the deep things. And so I had decided during my career that when I get done, that was kind of going to be my transition, was into the academic world and go back to school and try to figure out what this life is all about. And so I retired in 2016, and I right away signed up for Houston Baptist University for their master's program in apologetics. And it just confirmed kind of the passion, the fire that I had inside of me to continue to do that. Cause I loved it, Jason. I mean, it was so much fun, learning about God and learning about, defending the faith and, theological disciplines and things like that. So it was really just continued to fuel the fire. And so I actually started in 2018, started my degree at the University of Edinburgh, getting my master's in philosophy. And so really enjoying that, finishing that up this winter. And I'm hoping to go get a PhD in philosophy, and I'll start applying for PhD programs in the spring. I'm also at the Augustine Institute of Theology in Colorado. So obviously all this stuff is these distant programs, these online programs, which is great because nowadays you can do everything from your house. So lots of academic stuff going on, and I'm really enjoying it. It's fun, and it's helped my transition, Jason, because I know I'm sure you've talked to a lot of players and how difficult the transition out of the NFL is. And this has really given me something that has allowed me to focus and apply a lot of those things that I did, throughout football, the discipline and the hard work and all that stuff that you miss from the game, allowed me to do that in another arena. So it's helped my transition, and it's been a lot of fun.
Talk about that transition a little bit from not just being able to, go right into being being a student again, but there's a real transition that takes place when you're no longer doing what you've in a lot of ways been doing for, I don't know how many years. Mike, you probably played since you were a little kid, and suddenly you're not doing that anymore at, 30, 31, 32 years old. What was that adjustment like from just a human perspective of not having to worry about game planning and going to practice and figuring out how to do the whole family dynamic? What was the transition like for you?
Jason, it was incredibly difficult. I'm still not through it. And the academic stuff has helped. But if it wasn't for the grace of God, I don't know, I would have been in really bad shape. I mean, I've had a tough 3 years. I'm sure you talk to so many pro athletes. Your whole life is devoted to your sport, 365 days a year. I mean, I would get done with the season, an NFL season, take a couple days off, and then I'd be right back to training, right? So everything was focused on that, on football. And then when that's done and you're off the train, that train is gone. You're left standing there. And so the first year was incredibly difficult. My wife was pregnant with our second son. And it was just it was tough, and I'm so grateful that I have a wife who was able to stay strong, kind of hold me up, and really having to lean on my faith, because that transition is no joke, Jay. I mean, I still wake up with a pit in my stomach, but that first year I woke up and I just totally had lost my identity. And we laugh about, or I guess we don't laugh about, but we always talk about how, especially as Christians, our identity is in Christ, right? And and I always, paid that lip service, but I came to find out the hard way that wasn't the case. My identity was 100% in football, and so that's something that I'm still working through. But the first year, the 2016, was really, really difficult, and a lot of struggles that we can get into, but was a strain on my marriage, very disappointing as a father. And so I look back at that, and it was a learning season for me, but it was hard. It was really hard. And I've learned different ways to handle my emotions from missing football. There are times I just have to stay away from it and not pay attention to it. The season's a lot harder than the off season because it's on all the social medias, it's on TV. Yeah. So it's been really difficult, and it's been challenging, but I'm finally, I think, on the other side of it now. I don't wake up, depressed and upset that I'm not playing ball anymore. And it's really forced me to lean on my faith. And that's why my studies have been great, because as much as they are academic studies, they're in the world of theology and philosophy of religion. So it's basically, listening to sermons every day, which is a lot of fun and really kind of boosts my faith and reminds me what this is all about. So yeah, but we can get into that, Jay. But it's been tough, no doubt.
Yeah, I don't want to go where I'll go as deep as you want to go, but help me understand, because I'm thinking, okay, the transition from the identity of a football player is there, and you understand that that's hard. But you say it put a strain on your marriage, and kind of challenged you as a dad. But you're home more, so I'm trying to think from a perspective of being home, being more present with your wife, being more available to your kids than maybe you could have been or were when you were a football player, that would actually be a good thing. But you're saying there was difficulty in transitioning in being home more and not having something to do for a living.
It's so funny because it's kind of like a paradox, right? It was just like you think being home would lend itself to being able to press in more, and I'm sure for a lot of guys that is the case. But for me, being home more just meant being more absent. I was totally checked out because I just was, missing football and missing the routine. Once the routine is out of, I'm a routine person. I thrive on routines, and once the routine was done and I'm not working towards a goal, it was like, just took the life right out of me. I mean, I didn't even know. So, Jay, just to give you a point in reference, I mean, my whole life I've been lifting weights since 8th grade. My father was a professional bodybuilder, and so my whole life has been, designed around lifting and training. And my dad didn't let me play other sports growing up. He said, you're going to play football and then you're going to lift weights during the off season. And so I remember I retired and I went down into my gym and got ready to lift weights, and I took, put the squat rack on, took it off the bar and got ready to do squats. And I remember sitting there thinking, what am I doing? Like, what do I lift weights for now? Like, there's no reason to even do this. There's no point in this. So something like that, which is my total lifeblood, right? Which was training, didn't have any meaning or purpose in it anymore without football. I didn't know what do I lift weights for now? And so something so simple as that was gone. And, at least in my mind, I thought it was. And so, it was, even though I was present here in the house, I wasn't paying attention to my kids. I was irritable. I was tough. It was very difficult to deal with. My wife, she was pregnant at the time, 2016. And so she's going through that and trying to encourage me and motivate me and get me out of this funk. But I would spend days at home just kind of sitting on the couch, not doing anything, no drive. And knowing that I was doing that lended itself to being very irritated and getting angry quickly, and getting mad at my wife and mad at my son for no, simple little things. And so just not being a pleasant person to be around. And that translated out into the world. I would, go out grocery shopping or be driving in my car and somebody would cut me off or something and, the unforgivable sin. And I would chase them down and be yelling out the window. It's like a maniac. I mean, I was, totally really, really struggling. And so, it took some really close friends and some really pressing into Christ and really a process I'm still going through now to get through that. But back to your original question, even though I was here, I was totally absent. I was totally checked out from them. And at a time when I'm going to look back and regret that because that was, that was a time that I really could have maximized being home with my wife and son, and I didn't. So it'd be one of those things I regret later on in life, but I have to grow from it and get better, and it's something that motivates me to do a better job now, knowing that, okay, you wasted that time, your first year and a half out of the NFL, you got to maximize it now.
Mike DeVito is our guest here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Take us through your faith journey a little bit. You mentioned God, you mentioned following the call. You're certainly studying theology and philosophy, listening to sermons. So God's doing some cool things right now in your life, but where does that take shape for you? Where did that start? Where did that begin?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I grew up in a secular household. We didn't really have any, it wasn't, anti-God, but there was no religious upbringing. I mean, we were, a big Italian family, and my dad's name is Vinny. He's from Brooklyn, and he owns a construction company. I mean,
let me interrupt you for a sec. Your dad's Vinny. Your two sons are Rocco and Sal. That's and you're right. Mike. So I'm not messing with any of you guys. The DeVito family, that's it, right?
You got to say, and my brother's kids, my brother's name is John, and his kids are Dominic, Vinny, and John. So we got all these, like the FBI definitely has a dossier of, there's like way too many Italians in one area. They're like, there's something wrong got to be going on up there in the Northeast.
I love it.
But Vinny from Brooklyn, who owns a construction company. It's like every stereotype in one man. But we grew up in kind of a work hard, party hard household. It wasn't there wasn't this strict moral code. It was basically, listen, just don't get caught and do well in school and work hard, and you'll be fine. And so that's kind of the attitude we had. And it wasn't until my senior year in college that I came to Christ. And so there was a number of events. The first thing that really woke me up to thinking more big picture was the death of a friend. So I had a buddy of mine who played football with me at the University of Maine, and Jason, he embodied what you think of as a college football player. I mean, like 6'5", tattoos all over him, the mohawk. I mean, this was a tough dude and somebody I looked up to.
Yeah.
And he was shot and killed. He was, and this was right after he had left Maine. So he was 24 years old, and he had just got involved with the wrong people, and was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and was shot and killed at 24 years old. And so I remember going to his funeral and walking up to his casket, and here I am as, a 19, 20-year-old kid, and I'm looking down at a 24-year-old, and he's dead. He's gone.
Yeah.
And I'm staring this in the face. And I think it was the first time I really felt the presence of God working on me. Like, listen, you need to start thinking about this big picture. Especially in college, you're invincible. You're not thinking the kind of deep existential questions. You're thinking about what party am I going to next, and what's happening the next day. So I wasn't even paying attention to that. But this was the first thing that really woke me up to, okay, hey, let's pay attention. You need to start thinking about, what this life is really about. And so I had my best friend, Matt Mulligan, who actually played with me in the NFL with the Jets, and we were roommates in college, and he grew up in a Christian household. And so we were roommates, and he saw that I was searching, and he kind of took me under his wing and started ministering to me. And I remember he took me to church for the first time, his home church. So he's from Maine. We're at the University of Maine. So he took me to the church that he grew up in. And this is an old school, Jason's old school Pentecostal church, right? So double wide trailer. And he gives me the warning going in. He's like, look, I just want to give you a heads up. Like, this is a Pentecostal church, so people are going to be speaking in tongues. They're going to be running around the aisles. They're going to be falling out on the floor. It gets a little wild in there.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember thinking, I just want to go to see this happen. Like, this is this isn't what I think of when I think of church. Like, I think of, kind of the Orthodox kneeling and standing and sitting. Like, this sounds crazy. So I just went just to see that. I was like, I just got to see the circus. You got to show me this.
Yeah.
So he invited me to church, and I hesitantly went. And just like he said, that's what's going on. The wild Pentecostal service. And at the end of these services, I don't know if you've ever been to one, but at the end of these services,
yes, I've been to many.
Yeah, so they do. So you'll know that they do an altar call, right?
Yeah.
So they basically take the badness of the church and condense it in the front of the church, right? So
yeah.
So they do an altar call. They have everybody come up to the front and they start praying. So just like I said, all the stuff that's going on is now just condensed into the front at the altar. And another thing consistent with these churches, if you don't know Jesus, you're going to be up at that altar. And so they did the altar call, and I'm sitting back in my pew. I'm like, I'm not going up there. This is crazy. And they're up there, and the pastors and my buddies tell me, come up. You got to come up to the front. You got to come up to the front. And so finally I give in, and I walk up there, and I just kind of put my head down. And I say, listen, God, if you exist, like, just get me out of here as fast as possible. Like, this is the most uncomfortable situation I've ever been in. And so I'm sitting up there with my head down, and the pastor comes over, and he lays his hand on me, and then the assistant pastor comes over, and he lays his hand on me, and they start praying for me. And Jason, the best way I can describe it is just like a jolt of electricity through my body. And it was like, all of a sudden, everything became true, right? It was like somebody turned the light switch on. And it was like just this entire picture of Christianity and Jesus Christ and things that I didn't even know about became true in an instant, right? It was like, oh, this is right. This is where it's at. This is what God's been calling me to, and just that powerful experience. And it, I still to this day haven't felt anything like it. And I don't know if that speaks to my own Christian walk and something I'm doing wrong, But yeah, the power of God at that moment was just incredible, and it totally changed the trajectory of my life. So this was in 2006, right before 2007. So my last season at the University of Maine, and this happens in April of that year. So right after my last season, so 2007, right before I'm about to go to the Jets to start my NFL career, and it just was incredible because if I wouldn't have had this foundation. And this experience and this kind of new trajectory in life, I don't know if my NFL career would have lasted very long, because you see some of the things that guys fall into and the traps that gets them caught up, but having this foundation going into the NFL made a massive difference. So, God's timing is obviously always perfect, and so He saved me right before I entered the world in the NFL, and that's what allowed me to have the longevity that I did. I really believe that. I believe my career wouldn't have lasted as long, and I certainly wouldn't have had the peace that I had throughout, an NFL career without Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, especially, that's a great story, by the way. When you get to 2007, you're undrafted. You're coming out of the University of Maine, and I'm just off the top of my head, I can't think of a ton of University of Maine players that got to the NFL. I'm sure there aren't many, but you were one of the few that got there, and you weren't drafted, so you had to earn it. I tell people all the time, you want to talk to somebody who knows about defeat, disappointment, and having to work their way to where they get to. Talk to a player in the NFL who's playing currently or has played who is undrafted, because you have every stack, the deck is stacked against you, I guess is the right way to say it, when you get to, a training camp or an invite and all that. But you end up with the Jets. So you get saved and you're starting this NFL career. You make the team and you're in New York City. Well, a little bit outside, but you're in the New York City area playing for the Jets, and you have a lot of success. Walk us through the early years of trying to acclimate yourself into the NFL. You said you saw some things that, certainly I've talked to a lot of guys and been around the league long enough to know there are a lot of things that go on, temptations and different things that aren't really cool to talk about. But I would like to have you share a little bit about what you saw, certainly not naming names. We don't want to do that, but just some of the things that you saw and the temptations that came at you, and, having that foundation to keep you grounded as you're beginning this NFL career.
Yeah, it's so true, Jason. I mean, especially coming out of college, where you still have that college mindset, right? Where it's, so you see a lot of the older guys in the NFL, this isn't the case, but a lot of the younger guys who are just getting in, coming right out of college, still have some of that college mindset. They want to go out, they want to party, they want to have fun, which is fine. I'm not saying anything against that. I think what happened with me with the change in perspective and kind of and becoming a Christian, the most important thing was it allowed me to get or build relationships with the older guys who were also Christians, because you can tell the guys who just do things differently, and so knowing that I had just come to Christ, that I was new in my walk, new in my faith. I knew I needed to plug in to, wiser, older, smarter Christians. And so that allowed me to have the intentional mindset getting into the NFL. Like, okay, I need to figure out, who else is doing this walk, because we can't do this walk alone, right? And so I got to, my first year with the Jets in 2007, I had guys like Kenyon Coleman, right, and Brad Smith. And Jericho Cotchery, and these guys who are incredible faith. I mean, like I've never seen before, right? And they're setting the example. And so I was just focused on saying, okay, how are they doing life? How are they doing this NFL life? And just mimicking what they were doing, right? And so when there'd be down times or times where guys might get distracted, or downtime always tends to lend itself towards, boredom, which lends itself towards doing things that aren't always the best.
Absolutely.
This allowed me to be plugged into these older guys, these older men of faith, who I would go and seek out spending time with them. And so we would get to do lunch or spend, nights together watching movies and fellowshipping and just walking life together. And so that kept me focused on my Christian faith, and it kept me focused on football. And it allowed me to recognize what I was there for, which was to put it into grind, because I was undrafted, like you said, and it took everything to make that team and to stay in the NFL. And so you couldn't be focused on the distractions that I know so many guys, not just moral, say on a moral level, but just got focused in things outside of football that took them away from the game. And they never ended up, making the team or becoming anything special in the NFL, just because they were so distracted with other things going on off the field. And so this focus and foundation in Christ allowed me to pursue these older guys who were keeping me straight in my Christian walk, and also who were devoted to the game as well. And they taught me how to be an NFL player, how to be a true professional in the NFL. And coming in, Eric Mangini was our head coach, and so we had a really Coach Mangini is under that Belichick tree, right? And so it was very tough, especially
strict.
being a rookie. Yeah, very strict. Micromanaging every little thing. I mean, you had to be on your game constantly. If you were a minute late to a meeting, you were going to get cut. It didn't matter if you were a third-round draft pick.
Wow.
So you were. It was really a grind, and so to have that was another aspect of it. To have those brothers that are going through that together, that can pick you up when times are tough, when you're not doing well, when you've been at camp for doing 2-a-days for 30 days in a row, and you're just mentally ready to check out. You have your brothers there to hold you up. Jason, that bond that's forged between believers, not only, obviously in a locker room, the brotherhood is so strong, but it's exponentially strong with guys who share the same passion, the same beliefs, the same faith in Jesus Christ. And so having those guys to kind of hold me up, strengthen me, allowed me to again, avoid distractions, avoid the things that could have got me tripped up, focus on football, and to get through the difficult times, especially being undrafted free agent in 2007, coming in under a tough regime there.
What are some of those difficult times? You describe them as, difficult times as a football player, and obviously the ebbs and flows of a football journey has the highs and the lows. I mean, you played in 2 AFC Championship games. You were in the playoffs multiple times with Kansas City when you signed there and with the Jets. But take us through some of those sort of difficult moments. You talked about the difficult moments in retirement. What were some of those that you had to kind of walk through and work through as a player?
Yeah, the first thing I realized going into the NFL, and again, this speaks to why it's so important to have my Christian brothers, was it was a job now. It was really a job.
Yeah.
And the guys in that, in that locker room, the guys in that defensive line room, they were there to make money, you know what I mean? And they were there, and you were there to take money off of their table. And so there wasn't this kind of embrace, like, hey, we're brothers, welcome to the NFL kind of thing. It was very much like, wow, this world is cold, especially in training camp and OTAs and building up to the season where everybody's trying to make the team. And so I realized right away, like, wow, I'm in the real world now, and these are grown men. And so it's a cold world, but that allowed for me to really press into my Christian brothers. Like Kenyon Coleman was an absolute lifesaver with this, because he's in that defensive line room with me. And he's a longtime defensive end, played for like 14 years, played for the Cowboys and the Browns, and just an incredible man. And, I would sit next to him and just press into him, and he would just encourage me when I didn't practice well, right? So again, as a rookie, if you're not practicing well or playing well, you're going to hear it. You're going to hear it big time. And so I'd be getting chewed out, and he'd be right there, afterwards to hold me up and say, hey, I used to make the same mistakes. Don't worry about it. They're just giving you a hard time because you're the new guy. And things like that really would encourage me. And then we went 4-12 my first year in the NFL, 2007 with the Jets. Yeah. And so you talk about those years where we were winning, but going 4-12, that was the worst season I had. And it's tough to go to work when you're 4-12. There is a black cloud over the facility. Nobody is happy. Everybody recognizes that their jobs are at stake. Coaches, organization, players. And so everybody's uptight. Practices can get really volatile. Guys are at each other's throats. And so it was an atmosphere that could eat you right up. And I remember there were days, Jason, and it's scary to think about now, there'd be days I was walking down to the football field thinking, I don't want to do this. I just want to walk back in and change and get out of here, because this is just terrible.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm ready to give up on my lifelong dream because of how difficult it was, And so, but those were the kind of challenges. An NFL season, there's so many highs and lows, but when you're 4-12, and this is your first year in the NFL, you're starting to think, well, this is awful. This is what are we doing here? And so, again, going back to how important those relationships are, that Christian brotherhood, that kept me sane, that kept me grounded, and that gave me peace through the storm. But just being a rookie in the NFL, like you said, being an undrafted free agent in the NFL comes with a lot of challenges, plus the difficult season. It was really tough. Now, after my first year, things got much better from there. But my first year was really tough, and so having those guys to lean on made all the difference.
From a football perspective, we have obviously a lot of believers that listen to this podcast, but we have a lot of sports fans. I mean, I'm as big a sports fan as there is, and I always was, and that's why I got into the field that I got into when I was in college. But I never played in the NFL. So take me through the pain. They say there's being hurt and there's being injured, which is sort of the line you might hear from a lot of athletes, especially in the NFL. You played on the defensive line where you're hitting someone on every single play. I'm sure the pain and the injuries that you've gone through are numerous, but can you talk about playing through pain, the pain that you might feel on a Monday morning after playing on Sunday night as a defensive lineman, and what that looks like managing that and trying to play through that during an NFL season? Because I don't think fans really truly appreciate what guys try to do each and every week, especially in the trenches, to get their bodies and get themselves ready to play on a Sunday.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Jay, I took Vicodin and Toradol Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, almost every one of those days from 2009, so my third year in the NFL, all the way through to the end of my career in 2016.
There you go. Yeah.
Just because that was the only way I could get through it. I had terrible shoulders. I have shoulders of an 80-year-old man. I mean, just arthritic. There's no cartilage. It's just bone on bone. They're destroyed. And so there was no way for me to get through practice without, taking that kind of medication. And so what you learn to do quickly, and this is something I learned from the older guys coming into the NFL that, in college you didn't need to do because you're young and your body just recovers, is you need to implement the hot tubs, the cold tubs, the acupuncture, the massage, all that kind of stuff, all the rehabs and prehabs. You have to do that. Or your body just won't make it. I mean, it's such a violent game. And especially my first 5 years, which were under the old CBA. So you're doing, we were doing 2-a-days. We were in, during training camp. We were in pads, for practice all the way through 17 weeks of the season. Whereas after the new collective bargaining agreement in 2011, now, you have, I think it's like 11 padded practices during the year, and you can only have a certain number of padded practices in training camp. And so I think that's, those kind of rules are justified just because of the toll it takes on guys' bodies. When I got done my first year in the NFL, that first training camp, I remember my dad came after I got done with training camp and had made the team, and he looked at me and he said, you look like you just got, totally beaten and battered for a month. And I was like, yeah, that's what happened. I mean, it's such a wear and tear on your body, and you have to try to stay ahead of it. But, the saying was you're only 100% once, one day in the NFL, and that's your first day reporting to training camp. Because after that, you never get back to 100%. And so it's all about trying to implement those things to recover and stay healthy. But it's impossible. It's impossible to do. I mean, everybody at some point gets hurt. Yeah. If you spend more than 2 weeks in the NFL, you're going to get hurt at some point. And so you've got to try to learn to manage it. And you become used to it. I mean, now being out of the NFL for 3 years, I'm starting to feel normal pain again. Whereas like the stuff that I think hurts now, I wouldn't have paid attention to, in the NFL, just because you get used to it. You get so used to being in pain. But it did get to a point, especially in 2015, my last season, where I couldn't sleep at night. My shoulders were so bad that I could not. I just stayed up. I just remember the entire season. I mean, I would get 2 or 3 hours of sleep at night, and I didn't want to take the pain medication at home because I didn't want to get hooked on it. I didn't want to go down that road where I'm getting addicted to painkillers, and so I was so nervous to take that stuff at home. So I just tried to deal with it, but my shoulders had just fallen apart. My knees, I sprained my knees 2 or 3 times. Had 2 concussions. I had 15 stingers my last couple of years in Kansas City. So I had, neck issues. And it just, the wheels just started coming off the bus towards the end. But you can't sleep at night, and you're just miserable. You really start to think about, okay, is this worth it? You really start to think, okay, we need to reevaluate, how many more years I'm going to be doing this. And I remember when I got to the playoffs in 2015, so it was 2016 at that point, I was talking to my wife and I just said, listen, you got to remind me in March that I don't want to do this anymore. Because I know when March comes around, I'm going to get the itch and want to go back to football. I said, but I can't do this another season. I've gotten 2 concussions. And, Jason, when you start messing with your brain, you recover from a knee or an ankle, but when you start messing with the brain, that changes who you are as a person. And so I went back and reevaluated, and I just said, telling my wife, like, look, I can't do this again because I don't know what my body's going to be like going through another year of this. I had torn my Achilles in 2014, got the concussions in 2015, and so I was just a mess by the time I got to the end. And I'm still paying for it now. I mean, I've lost weight, and so things have gotten better in that regard. But I live up in northern Maine, and when it starts to get cold up here, it's unbearable. I mean, right now my shoulders are killing me. So the NFL takes a toll on you, but it's the price. It's really the price you pay. And so I'm grateful for it. And I hope it doesn't sound like I'm complaining. I mean, it's just the nature. It's the nature of the game, and it's what you sign up for. But I wouldn't have done anything differently. I wouldn't have done it differently. I'm grateful for the game and how much it taught me. And so it was, and obviously the life it's afforded me. And so it was, worth the pain and all the stuff I went through. But yeah, it is. It's an incredibly physical game, and it's something you need to learn to manage and something that you'll deal with for the rest of your life.
So you say it was worth it. No regrets at all.
Yeah, no regrets at all, Jason. In fact, I have regrets, but not. It's not devoting more time to the game. I grew up a Jets fan, and so Tom Brady has haunted me my entire life. You know what I mean? I mean, this Tom Brady and the Patriots have been haunting me since 2001, and then they haunted me throughout my whole career. Right, playing for the Jets, I'm always getting beat by New England. Go out to Kansas City, my last game in the NFL. Where is it? In Gillette Stadium, losing to Tom Brady in the playoffs. In 2016. Right. So, I mean, just haunted my whole life. But there's nothing he's done that's haunted me more than something he said in a documentary that he did after I retired. So I think it was 2017. Brady did a thing called Tom versus Time on Facebook, which was a documentary that, it was really well done. They followed him around, and they were, watching his training and the stuff he does with his family. And so it was really cool. But one of the things he said right in the first episode, they were filming him, and they sat him down, and he said, look, if you're going to compete against me on Sunday, he said, you better be ready to give your life. He said, because I've given my life for this game. And so if you think you're going to win on Sunday, you better give your life to this game too, or you're not going to have any shot. So, something along those lines. Yeah. And it was like a shot in the stomach, because I look back at my career and I think, dang, I didn't give my life. I didn't. There were a lot of times I made excuses. There were a lot of times I chalked it up to being hurt, where I didn't put in the extra effort, where I didn't get that extra lift in, where I didn't get up early and watch the film that I should have, or study the way I should have. And so I had 9 years at the highest level, and I didn't maximize it. And one thing I realized quickly is once that door closes, it's over. And now never again will you play football. I play football. And so that's just hit me in the gut. Now I look back and think, man, so many opportunities left out there. What could I have been if I had taken that advice and given my life to the game? I almost certainly wouldn't have been the Tom Brady of defensive line, but I think I would have been a lot better than I was. And so I was an average football player, and now I have to live with that. So something that's where my regrets are. The injuries and that stuff. They come with. They come with the territory, but that's what I look back and I feel regret about.
You did get him in 2010, though, right? Didn't you go up to Foxborough and beat them? The Jets did.
Yes, that was probably the biggest win in my career. So we had lost. This was the 2010 season. We had finished 11-5, I believe. So we were good in New York. But we had lost to New England in the regular season. It was in December, a Monday night game, I believe. And we lost to them like 42-3 or something.
I remember
crazy.
that. Yeah.
And then we make the playoffs. We win the wild card round, and so the divisional round is back in New England. And so we're going back there, coming off that 43-2-3 loss 3 or 4 weeks earlier, and went in there and beat them, right, and beat them handedly. And they were 14-2. I mean, if they would have beat us, they almost certainly would have won the Super Bowl that year, because they would have had Pittsburgh at home, and then they probably would have beat Green Bay in the Super Bowl. But we went up there and just pounded them. And, in Rex Ryan, New York Jets fashion, talking crap and can't wait, Bart Scott at the end of the game.
Yeah.
That was the biggest win of my career. That was a ton of fun. And it's funny, even up here living in New England, they still, what do they have? They have 6 Super Bowls now. They're in the Super Bowl every other year, and they're still mad about the 2010, 2011 playoffs. I still have to hear crap for it, for beating them. It's like, you guys just can't get enough. Try being a Jets fan. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Patriot fans need to calm down if they're still thinking about 2010 with everything else that's happened in the last 20 years with them. Come on.
Jason, they are. They really are. I look at not hyperbole. They really are still mad. Like, I still get crap for that. They're like, well, yeah, you guys beat us then. That was ridiculous.
That's so funny. Let me close it as we get to the end here, Mike. This has been really great in this conversation with this last question, and it's a question we ask all of our guests on the podcast. I'm curious where he has you right now, where the Lord has you, because you're back full-time as a student, 3 years out of the NFL. You're hosting a great podcast called 3 Point Stance and doing some things in the football world, obviously a husband and a dad. What is God teaching you right now? What are you learning from the Lord where he has you right now in this season of life?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, Jason. And the one thing he has done is lifted me up through that brokenness, right? And I think that was so important because, like I said, in retirement, how difficult that was the first couple of years. It really was a striking, realization that Christ is not the center of my life. And how devastating that can be. You hear the statistics about the divorce rate and how guys go broke. I think it's 75% within 3 years of retirement, something crazy like that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I totally, looking at that when I was in the NFL, I was like, wow, I can't imagine why guys do that. And now I totally understand why. That time is so difficult. And so it was really a realization to me, and really having those one-on-one conversations with God, like, look, you need to press in. And this has to be your foundation, and you can't fake it anymore. You can't fake it anymore. And so God's rebuilt that foundation, to recognize how important that is, how important he is, and how important it is to do life with him as the ultimate focus and the ultimate purpose and goal and meaning and giving life to everything else that I'm doing. And that is another thing that I think would have made my NFL career a lot better, is if I really would have played for an audience of one, like I'm supposed to have, and done it for the Lord, instead of doing it for myself. But yeah, so he's he's really rewired me to think things through correctly and recognize that putting him first is the most important thing, and staying plugged in my prayer life and my studies, and to having a relationship with him, and then going forward from there. And so that was incredibly important. And again, another thing I wouldn't trade for the world. And then trying to maximize being a husband and a father. So I talk about that Tom Brady story, and having those regrets as a football player. I don't want to have those regrets as a Christian, as a husband, as a father. When I get to the end of life and look back, I want to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. And I want to look back at my life with my wife and my sons and think, I maximized every moment with them. I don't want to look back and say, wow, I wasted it. And so I've kept that mentality and that motivation to be intentional in those areas, and to live as a Christian husband and a Christian father, and trying to live out those ideals in those areas of my life. And so doing that is obviously the focus. And then secondary would be, this career in academia that he has me on. Obviously, I'm not the smartest guy on the block. And again, I've been smashing my head against metal for 20 years. So starting behind the eight ball. But I really enjoy this. And I say that jokingly, but seriously, it can only be from God that that this fire has been lit to do theology and philosophy. And because I was never a guy who enjoyed academics prior to, 2000, getting saved in 2007. So I know he has something going in this and in pursuing this higher education. What it is, I'm not sure. But I know I don't want to go to bed at night because I want to be up studying. I can't wait to get up early, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and get to studying and writing because I love it so much. And so I know that's from the Lord, and I'm excited to see what he does with that. What exactly it is, I don't know. But I'm going to stay faithful and continue to plug through and maximize every second I have on this earth, Jason.
So and this will be the last thing I say. So what do you envision doing though? Like in 5 to 10 years, you're studying theology and philosophy. Do you think God could call you into ministry to be a pastor or something like that? What are you envisioning 5 to 10 years from now?
It's interesting. So the one thing that football has allowed me to do is do a lot of speaking, and so I've preached. I've probably preached 200 sermons, Jason. I mean, I've awesome. Especially up here in the Central Maine area, where being a pro athlete, there's not a former pro athlete. There's not many of us up here, so I've gotten a lot of invitations to speak. And one thing I've noticed with that, as much as I enjoy doing that. Being a pastor is a very special calling, and it's a very specific calling.
Yes.
And I don't know if I'm built for it. I don't know if that's what God has made me for. And so I say that to say all those speaking engagements have given me a kind of a front row seat of what it's like to be a pastor, and the challenges that come with that. It's easy to prayerfully put together a sermon and then go up there on Sunday and preach it. But then when you're standing at the altar at the end of a service and people are coming up to you with their problems and what they're going through, and you're just like, I'm incredibly introverted. That's very hard for me, and I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm just socially awkward, and so it just I'd be wiped 2 or 3 of those conversations, and I'm ready to go to bed. And I feel like a lot of times I haven't been very helpful. It's like, what, let me just pray for you because I really don't know what to say. So it's given me that behind the scenes scoop of what it takes to be a pastor. And it's not just getting up there and preaching on Sundays. And so I don't know if that's what God's called me to. I think I'd like to continue to be in academia and publish, Christian philosophy, publish Christian apologetics. So defending the faith and putting forth arguments for the existence of God and defending objections to the existence of God. And then maybe being a college professor. I think I would like to go and try to teach this stuff, maybe at seminaries or teaching philosophy at colleges. I would enjoy, doing that. So engaging Christianity at more of a notional level than a real assent. But yeah, that's kind of what I feel like God's called me to. And we'll see. I'm honestly not sure, to be honest with you, Jason. I'm not sure what it's going to be like in 5 or 10 years. But I kind of see the couple steps ahead of me, right? It's like continue on this path with the schooling and what you're doing. And so I'm hoping that at some point the fog will lift and I'll see why God has me doing all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to know his plan. We just need to be obedient to him, and he'll take care of the rest, and that's awesome. I think there's a book in Mike DeVito's future, too. I'm just saying we can talk about that offline, but I think you could write a book, my friend. You got a pretty amazing story.
Well, Jason, I got to follow you because you're the one pumping out all the amazing books, brother. You got one coming out, right? You got one coming out soon?
I do, yeah. I don't talk about it much on the podcast, but I have a new book called The Uniform of Leadership, which is coming out in the spring of 2020. And I wrote my first book a couple years ago on forgiveness, Live to Forgive. So, yeah, it's been a journey. And I'm just saying this because maybe I've been in this book world that I know I know a story when I hear it, and I know what somebody would want to read from, different people. And I think your story and just everything that you shared here, man, would be awesome to put into a book form. So we'll see. We'll see what the Lord has, right?
Definitely, Jason. That's encouraging. I would love to do something like that. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see the reaction of the podcast. The people listening might say, "Oh, Mike, just pack it in. pack it in, brother. Story's born."
Mike DeVito, man, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for spending time with us here on Sports Spectrum. We'll do it again, and we should just make time and get to meet in person. Maybe tape another podcast, because you aren't that far from me up in Maine. I'm here in Connecticut, so let's make a point to do that. And again, thanks for sharing your story here on Sports Spectrum.
Jason, it's been an honor. Thank you for your ministry, brother. You're amazing, and I'm so grateful to have been on today. I really appreciate it.
That was Mike DeVito, and he is the real deal. I love talking to Mike. Great stories, just a really humble guy, and not afraid to get a little transparent with his struggles and his difficulties. Just thinking about his shoulders, being an 80-year-old man's shoulders, and the fact that they're still hurting, and the pain and the work and the blood, sweat, and tears, as they say, that he had to walk through and go through as an NFL player, and now paying for that a little bit, but no regrets, and living for Jesus, and that's pretty cool. Love Mike and what he's doing. Give him a follow over on Twitter at Mike DeVito70, at Mike DeVito, and then the number 70, his number when he played. Great guy. Definitely be praying for him, his wife, Jessie, his two sons, Rocco and Sal DeVito. I mean, those kids are not going to get picked on when they get older. That is for sure. Mike's a great guy. We really appreciate him sharing his story here on Sports Spectrum. We also appreciate Compassion International, who sponsor this podcast and sponsor and partner with us at Sports Spectrum. A hope more powerful than poverty. That's what Compassion is about, and an opportunity for you and I to use our influence for good by releasing a child from poverty, by sponsoring a child through Compassion. NFL players Nate and Lexi Solder, as well as DeBrickashaw Ferguson, Mike DeVito's former teammate with the Jets, both are advocates for Compassion International. If you check out Nate Solder's Twitter page, you'll hear more and see more about why he got involved and making a lasting impact and helping release children from poverty. He's been down there in the mission field and see the impact that Compassion can have. And they have a giant impact releasing children from poverty. And that poverty, it really is a vicious cycle, but through Compassion, it can be broken. And you can help by sponsoring a child through Compassion. It's $38 a month, tax deductible, and an opportunity to provide food, education, medical care, and vocational training. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum. Compassion.com/sportsspectrum. Over 2 million children are breaking the cycle of poverty for good with Compassion International. Get involved, pray about it, and consider releasing a child from poverty today. Really want to thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Click that subscribe button. If this is the first time you've ever listened to Sports Spectrum, welcome. We don't want you to miss any episodes going forward. It's really become a daily show here at Sports Spectrum, and lots of great interviews on the intersection of sports and faith. So click that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the podcast. Also, check us out on our social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We are there, and lots of great content on those pages, and they all really direct to our website, sportspectrum.com, and that's the place to go where you can see articles all day long on the intersection of sports and faith. Daily devotional starting at 6 a.m. Eastern, a great way to intersect sports and faith and get yourself rooted in God's Word early in the morning, every morning at 6 a.m. Eastern. And then our podcast is there. Every single episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast, all of the archival content going back years and years and years, you can find it at sportspectrum.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time with a brand new episode here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Have a great rest of your day.